Hello, happy new year. It is January 1st, which means it's time to talk about all of my favorite books from 2025. 2025 was a really bad year, I'll be honest. It was a up and down year for me personally, professionally, emotionally. Everything about this past year has been just kind of bad. So I am really excited for the start of a new year and for kind of a clean slate for myself, for reading, for content, for everything. I'm really looking forward to 2026 because I think this is going to be the best year yet. It certainly can't be worse. It was a very up and down year for books as well. I ended up reading 66 books total, which I'm really happy with considering there was a point in the year where I didn't even think I was going to hit 60. So the fact that I met my reading goal, but then also surpassed it and also surpassed the amount of books that I read in 2024 makes me really happy. So I'm excited to talk to you about the 10 best books that I read in 2025. Almost all of these are fiction books. I had a really lackluster year for nonfiction. I really wanted to read a lot of nonfiction in 2025 and I ended up only reading 5. I have one absolute standout nonfiction book and I'm going to talk about that first, and then I'll talk about the 9 fiction books that I ranked. My absolute favorite nonfiction book this year was One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This by Omar El Akkad. This is a part memoir, part journalistic exploration about our author's experience growing up as a Middle Eastern man. And then it also looks at the war in the Middle East, specifically Palestine and Gaza, and how the world is viewing what is going on in the Middle East and how things are really bad right now and nobody's really speaking out about that. But then in 10, 20, 50 years, when the war is over, everyone will come out and say, well, I was against that. The author is a journalist, so he does a lot of investigating not only the events that are being covered in this book, but also the feelings of the people that are in and around and just experiencing these situations. I think it is one of the strongest nonfiction books I've ever read. I would absolutely consider it a must read for anyone who is at all interested in learning more about the conflict in the Middle East and how the worldview of that is just so warped. I just think this is one of the best books that I've ever read. It is one of the best books I read this year, but I wanted to highlight it here at the beginning first because it is the only really standout nonfiction book that I read. I think that if you're going to take any recommendation from me from this video, then it should be this one. Moving on, let's talk about my 9 favorite fiction books of 2025. These are not all books that came out in 2025, but they are all books that I read in 2025 and really enjoyed. These are the books that have stuck with me throughout the year. Even though not all of them were 5 stars, these are the ones that I would recommend above all others. Number 9 on my list is The Will of the Many by James Islington. This is the first book in the Hierarchy series. It follows our main character Viz, who is an orphan, but pretty quickly on you find out that he's actually the long-lost prince of a neighboring rival kingdom to the one that he is currently living in. In this world, the magic system is made up of will, so everyone has will. Essentially, it's their life force, and the way that the society works is that everyone cedes their will to the hierarchy above them, so it's essentially like a big pyramid scheme. At the beginning of the book, Viz is adopted by a high-ranking military official, and he is sent on an undercover mission into this prestigious military academy to kind of figure out what exactly is going on there. This is such a fun and interesting and super compelling fantasy story. It's a really great first installment in what I imagine is going to be an incredibly explosive series. I think there were a lot of really fantastic elements about this book. I really love books set in schools, and especially when there's some kind of fantastical mystery element. There's also some trials in this book that make the storyline compelling. It makes the pace move along very quickly. The way that this book ends opens up such a wide variety of directions that a series like this could go that I am so excited to pick up the next book in the series. And if for some reason you haven't read The Will of the Many yet, I would really highly recommend doing so if it sounds even at all like something you could enjoy, because I guarantee you probably will. Number 8 on my list is Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey. This is a climate fiction story about our main character Franny, who is a biologist. She is studying birds and bird migration patterns. At the start of the book, she convinces a ship captain and his crew to allow her on their ship to follow the last surviving flock of Arctic terns as they make their final migration to Antarctica. And of course, because it's Charlotte McConaughey, there is a bit of a mystery element. Over the course of the story, you find out that Franny is running from some things in her past, and those are slowly revealed over the course of the book. And it's just so fantastic. I think Charlotte McConaughey understands humans in a really interesting way. And I think he's also exploring conservation in a really interesting way as well. You can tell just by reading her books that she cares very much about the earth and what is happening to the earth and the effect that humans have on the earth. I really love how Charlotte McConaughey balances the mystery elements with character development, with the literary aspects, even romance in some cases. And I think that everybody should read Charlotte McConaughey's books. They're so incredible. And I'll just go ahead and spoil that this is not the final entry for Charlotte McConaughey on this list. So if that tells you anything, it should tell you to pick up and read her books. Number 7 on this list is Empire of Shadows by Jacqueline Benson. This is the first book in the Raiders of the Arcana series. This is a historical romance, adventure, magical adjacent series following our main character Ellie, who is an archivist, but because she is a woman and there are very few women in this field, she is looked down upon by her male colleagues. At the beginning of the book, she comes across an artifact that could lead to the discovery of a long thought lost magical city, and so she sets off for the jungles of British Honduras and persuades a surveyor named Adam Bates to lead her into the jungle to help her find this magical city. The relationship that slowly forms between Ellie and Adam is so much fun to read about. They have such great banter and they really just bounce off of each other in a really fantastic way. I also really love the mystery elements, the adventure elements, of course, because things can't be simple. There are people chasing Ellie after the city as well. So the stakes feel pretty high. The tension is really nice. And it's just a really fun series. I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it, so I feel like it's pretty underrated, but it is a series that I feel like deserves more hype. So if you're interested in things like Veronica Speedwell or Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, then this is a book that I would highly recommend picking up next. Number 6 is The Dream Hotel by Layla Lalami. This is a near futuristic literary sci-fi story following our main character, Sarah, who is coming back from a work trip and she's actually detained at the airport and she's sent to this prison-like facility where she is being assessed. Essentially, in this world, technology has been developed to analyze people's dreams, and dream analysis can lead to the arrest of potential criminals. Sarah has been arrested because she had a dream about killing her husband, and so she is on the radar of the government, and she is sent to this place to sort of be assessed for what she is told is going to be just a few weeks, but ends up being much closer to a year. This is a really interesting speculative sci-fi story that feels like it could be real, honestly. It is so adjacent to the current climate of the United States that at times it was difficult to read just because I could so easily see the injustices of what happens in this book happening in real life. In many ways, very similar injustices are already happening, just in a different capacity, and so that made the book feel just that little bit scarier. I think that Sarah is a really compelling main character. She meets other women in this facility who have similar or even different life experiences to her, and they sort of form this little group of people trying to figure out what is really going on. It did feel like it hit a little bit too close to home, so for those reasons I would say that it even also feels a little bit like horror adjacent, just because it feels like it could be real at any second. This was on the Women's Prize for Fiction long list. It wasn't on the short list. I think that's a shame. I think this is the book that should have won the Women's Prize this year, so I would highly, highly, highly recommend checking it out. My fifth favorite book of 2025 was A Mouthful of Dust by Nevo. This is the 6th book in the Singing Hills cycle, which follows a cleric named Chi as they travel around the land and collect the stories of the people that they meet. In this installment, Chi has traveled to a village that has recently recovered from a famine, and so they're collecting the stories of the people that had to do potentially unspeakable things to survive this famine. And there's also a bit of a mystery element to it as well that makes the book a little bit more exciting. I think the Singing Hills cycle is so much fun. It is a series of novellas. All of the books are around 100 to 120 pages, and each one is just such an interesting commentary on humans and the different experiences that people have. I love Chi as a main character. They are so interesting, and despite the fact that they have collected all of these different types of stories, they remain neutral in everything that they experience, and I just really admire that. I think if you've read the first couple of books and then maybe didn't like the middle books quite as much, I would recommend absolutely going back to this series, because I feel like books 5 and 6 were the standouts of the series. I loved book 5. I absolutely loved book 6, and I can't wait to read book 7 when it comes out in May. Number 4 on my list is The Wedding People by Alison Esbach. This follows our main character Phoebe, who is an adjunct professor at a university, and her husband has recently left her for one of their colleagues. At the beginning of the book, she decides that she's going to take a trip without him. She's going to take a trip that they have been meaning to take for many years, and she's just going to do it without him. So she travels to this hotel that she's always wanted to stay at, and when she gets gets there, she finds out that there's actually a wedding happening that weekend, and the entire hotel has been booked, and for some reason, she has been given the one available room in this entire hotel. At the start of the story, she runs into the bride in the elevator, and that leads her to get caught up in some of the wedding shenanigans as this week goes on. You pretty quickly find out that Phoebe's motives for going to this hotel are not exactly innocent. She is intending to end her life, and when the bride finds out, she tells her that there's absolutely no way she can do that while it's her wedding weekend. It will ruin everything. And so Phoebe spends a few days sort of reevaluating herself, her priorities, her relationships, and is a really heartwarming story despite the fact that it is incredibly depressing, especially at the beginning. Phoebe is really struggling because her husband's left her. She has no direction in her job. She feels like her world is coming down around her. Then she meets all these people and she starts to see a different way that life can go. I think the thing I appreciate most about this book is that it has a really dark subject matter. Phoebe is intending to end her life because she feels like she has nothing left to live for. And the book does not spend any time saying that all of these things will fix her. She's not under the assumption that falling in love with someone will solve all of her problems, or finding a better job, or moving away from her house, or whatever it may be. But there are things that she can live for. And I feel like the message of that is super hopeful. And I really, really enjoyed this book. Moving into the top three, my third favorite book of 2025 was There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak. In this book, we're following three different timelines. The first of those is a man in the 1840s in London who encounters the Epic of Gilgamesh. And that leads him to traveling to the city of Nineveh, where he encounters the people of Nineveh and their way of life. It's also set in 2014, and we're following a young girl who is in the process of going deaf. And her grandmother really wants to take her back to their ancestral homeland so that she can hear and experience it before she completely loses her hearing. And then some very bad things happen that lead this girl to have to survive. Our final timeline is set in 2018, and we're following a hydrologist named Zalika who has recently divorced from her husband and is living on a houseboat. All of these stories are connected by the perspective of a single drop of water and its lifetime. And I think that this book is just so incredibly brilliant. Because this book is only about 400 pages and we have three different timelines, it would be easy to assume that some of these timelines suffer for the development of others, but I feel like all three of these timelines were incredibly well developed. I felt like all of the perspectives were super engaging, and I never dreaded getting back to one person's timeline. I never dreaded leaving someone for someone else's perspective because I was equally compelled by all three stories. I feel like just the craftsmanship of this book was so excellent, and I am so eager to read everything that Elif Shafak has written. I know she has a very extensive backlist, and this is the first of her books that I've read, so I'm so excited that I have so many more stories by her to read. I think this is just such a brilliant book, and I think the structure of it is the best structured book of the entire year. And the only reason it's not at the top of the list is that there were just two books that hit me in a more emotional way that ended up higher on the list, but this is like probably from a craft perspective, the best book that I read in 2025. And I feel like more people need to read it. I feel like on any given day, my top two books could be interchanged. And I feel like if you had asked me yesterday, the book that I'm about to talk about would have been my favorite of the year. And today I feel like this is number two and my favorite book is my favorite book. But then tomorrow it could be switched. So take both of my final two as ultimate recommendations of books that I absolutely think everybody should be reading. But number two on my list is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. I truly thought when I finished this that this was like my favorite book of the year, and I said that in several places. Now reflecting after a couple months away from it, I do think this is number two, and I do think number one is number one. But, you know, like I said, tomorrow it could be different. Intermezzo follows the story of two brothers, Peter and Ivan, who are dealing with the recent death of their father in very different ways. Peter is an attorney who is in a relationship with a much younger woman, but is still very much hung up on his university girlfriend, who he speaks to regularly and has a very deep connection with that makes things very complicated for his current girlfriend. Ivan is a chess prodigy who at the beginning of the book gets into a relationship with a much older woman, and he is also sort of trying to figure out how to love chess again. And so this woman not only helps him grieve his father, but also rediscover his love of chess. But because she's older than him, it sort of complicates not only their relationship, but also his relationships with his mom, with his brother. At the heart of this book is a very complicated, complex relationship between these two brothers. There are 10 years between them. Their ages are quite far apart, and so they are in two completely different places in their lives, but they are dealing with the same tragedy. They are dealing with the death of their father. And it's such an interesting look at family relationships, the human experience, siblings, complicated sibling dynamics. I think that Sally Rooney writes about the human experience like no one else. She knows how humans are. She writes in a very realistic and relatable way. Every single book of hers that I've read, even Conversations with Friends, which I didn't really love, I feel like those characters are real, tangible people. I feel like they're people that you would encounter in your everyday life. Intermezzo is no different. This is 100% her best book. It is such a fantastic book. I don't really think that she needs a ton of recommendation because everybody's reading Sally Rooney. Everybody loves Sally Rooney with good reason. She is an amazing author. This is 100% a standout for me. This is a book that I will continue to think about for years and years and years. I will never stop reading Sally Rooney. I've given 3 of her books 5 stars now, so I think that means that she's like a favorite author of all time, and I can't wait to read whatever she writes next. And finally, my absolute favorite book of 2025. It is the most incredible book that I read this year, and I have not been able to stop thinking about it all year long, and that is Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. This is my first Charlotte McConaughey. This was the first one I read earlier this year, and I think that this book by itself maybe solidified Charlotte McConaughey as a potential new all-time favorite author because I loved this book. This is another climate fiction story following our main character, Inti, who is a biologist that is studying wolves. This book is set in the Scottish Highlands, and Inti and her team are working to reintegrate wolves into nature. Inti is also the caretaker for her sister, who has recently experienced an unbelievable trauma and no longer speaks. At the start of the book, there is an encounter with a local farmer who is incredibly against the wolves being reintegrated into the Highlands. And when that farmer turns up dead, Inti knows that the wolves will be blamed, and so she sets out to figure out exactly what happened to this man and make sure that her wolves are not blamed for something they didn't do. So again, it has a really interesting mix of conservation elements, a really compelling mystery, super interesting characters, a main character that I absolutely loved and rooted for from the very beginning. Similar to Migrations, this is a warning to humans about what will happen to the planet if they don't take care of it, but also it's a book about resilience. It's a book about motherhood. It's a book about just surviving. And I loved it. I loved it so much. I believe in my heart of hearts, and this is going to be an unpopular opinion because I know so many people love her 2025 release, but I think this is Charlotte McConaughey's best work. This book is incredible, and I think more people need to be reading it. And I can't wait to see what Charlotte McConaughey is going to do next. She could become like an all-time or my favorite all-time favorite author because this was incredible. This was so incredible, and I want everybody to read it. So those are my top 10 books of 2025. It was such an up and down reading year, but I really do feel like these 10 books were absolute standouts, and they sort of made the rest of the reading year worth it. If you can read 10 really good books, and it kind of makes up for the 50 other sort of more lackluster books. You know, there were some definite books that didn't quite make this list that I also really enjoyed. So I might leave like a little list of honorable mentions down in the description of some other books that I would 100% recommend that just didn't quite crack this top 10. But overall, I'm so happy with how my reading went in 2025, and I'm even more excited to see how it's going to go in 2026. I'm determined to have my best reading year ever. I am determined to have so many 5-star reads that by the end of the year, I have a really hard time picking my top 10. So stick around for that journey. Let me know down in the comments if you read any of the books that I mentioned in this video and what you thought about them. Do you have similar or different opinions to me? I'd really love to know. And also let me know some of your favorite books that you read in 2025. I'm obviously always looking for more potential 5 stars and more potential favorite books ever. So maybe let me know what your favorite books of 2025 were, and I'll add them to my 2026 TBR. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, what probably ended up being an incredibly long video, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!